The great snow solar term had arrived, and the weather was growing colder by the day. The temperature changes between morning and evening were especially rapid. One moment it felt like a gentle spring breeze, and the next like stepping into an icebox. Ethan Lee, a sophomore, stood alone on the school's athletic field. After his physical education class, he gazed at the place where he used to attend lessons. The past vibrancy and excitement had faded, leaving only a few empty footprints. Perhaps the sun was the only thing he yearned for and considered a confidant. He stared blankly at the blood-red sun. The athletic field, devoid of sunlight, resembled a scene from a black and white television. On the dark, damp ground, groups of students stood in neat, tofu-like formations, listening humbly and attentively to their instructor. The air was filled with playful laughter and shouts. A dozen or so soccer players, like ravenous wolves, charged towards the goal, sometimes forming a wall to defend, and other times scattering like water. On the track, lively figures pounded the ground with a thump, 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 the muscles on their faces jiggling with each stride. He squatted and watched for a long time, gradually becoming disheartened. Everything seemed alien to him, as if he belonged to a bygone era. A bitter smile flickered across his face as he shook his head. All the joy belonged to them. He had nothing, not even someone to talk to. He glanced at his watch. 6 p.m. The setting sun still radiated a majestic, unapproachable light, intense, cruel, sorrowful. The fire continued to burn, the blazing sun showing no sign of weakening, instead fiercely refusing to relinquish its grip on the world. Its scarlet, narrow gaze watched the earth like a vengeful enemy, its angry flames reflected in the glass of the gymnasium building. Logically, the fire fueling the sun should have died out long ago, leaving only ashes scattered by the wind to blanket the sky. But today, everything was different. This realization startled Ethan, though he couldn't quite articulate what it was. He simply felt as if the sun were carrying a heavy stone, moving slowly and laboriously. It was time for dinner. His stomach was rumbling incessantly. He stood up, and a sudden darkness enveloped him. A tingling sensation ran through his head, and he felt dizzy, as if suspended in midair. Instinctively, he pressed his index finger and thumb to his temples. Shouts, screams, gasps, curses, footsteps, all crashed into his ears, as if weeds had sprouted inside, filling him with panic. He opened his eyes, stunned by the scene before him. He swayed, unable to stand steady, his eyes shining like a string of bright light bulbs. The sky was as black as the bottom of a pot, and a thick fog limited visibility to about 15 feet. All around, he could hear chaotic, hurried footsteps and see indistinct dark figures. Everything had changed so quickly, like a rocket escaping Earth's gravity. The sun had vanished before everyone's eyes. While people's lives moved at a fast pace, they were still sequential. No one had ever seen something disappear and reappear so abruptly, so that even 2 hours later, people were still doubtful, as if they were in a dream. The campus was in chaos, filled with crowds whispering and pointing at the sky, engaging in endless discussions. Ethan returned to his dorm, where he found only silence, punctuated by the tapping of keyboards and faint, drawn-out breaths. The air was thick with the acrid smell of smoke. He stepped inside, choked by the fumes, and hurried to the balcony for a breath of fresh air. The trash on the balcony was ankle-deep, crackling and dancing wildly with each step he took. "This is too strange, the sun just disappeared," he said, opening the dorm's front and back doors to allow the smoke to flow into the night like a long dragon drinking from a stream. Everyone in the dorm was intently staring at their computer screens. After a long pause, no one spoke, and he didn't know if they had even heard him. "It suddenly got dark," he added, his voice filled with terror. "If it's not dark at night, it's like daytime, you idiot," Paul Kong said, his eyes glued to his computer screen. Paul, who slept in the lower bunk below Ethan, was chain-smoking, the blue smoke obscuring his face, revealing only the intermittent glow of his cigarette. Annoyed, Ethan climbed onto his bunk and flopped onto the bed. Books on the shelf teetered and slid off, falling with a crash into the 6-inch gap between the bed and the wall. "Damn it! Can't you be a little quieter?" Paul roared from below. Ethan ignored him, his heart heavy and his eyes burning. He felt the urge to cry. Suddenly, the fluorescent light flickered and went out, plunging the dorm into darkness. Paul jumped out of bed, cursing, "Damn it! The power's out. Frustrated, he slammed his mouse down several times and yelled, "Damn it. The internet's down too." The entire building fell silent for a moment. Then, after about 10 minutes, angry curses erupted like bamboo shoots after a spring rain, as countless water bottles were thrown to the ground. "Let's watch the show." Ethan climbed down from his bunk and rushed to the balcony. Across the way, many candles flickered in the windows of the apartment building, as voices sang a lonely love song like a tidal wave. "I can't hold on to love, I always watch it slip away. Happy people are everywhere in this world, why can't I be one of them? For love, lonely people." The dorm manager, an older woman, stood below with a flashlight, shining it upwards and shouting angrily, "You guys up there, it's dark, be careful you don't fall and kill yourselves, you bunch of bastards. Screw you. What are you acting tough for? Tomorrow is the apocalypse, and you're going to die too." The dorm manager immediately fell silent. "Sisters, boldly go forward, don't look back. A chore." Us of cheers erupted from above, like a triumphant victory song. "The apocalypse," Paul said slowly, his voice tinged with fear. My phone," he suddenly shouted, frantically grabbing his phone to call his parents. He held the phone to his ear for a long time without saying a word, as everyone knew he couldn't get through. He collapsed onto his bed, sighing, "The apocalypse, haha, it's all a lie, no one believes it." Though he said this, he couldn't understand why he couldn't get through, and he tried to find any reason to reassure himself. "The sun was weird today, it suddenly got dark," Ethan said. The dorm returned to its usual late-night quiet. Paul's ears echoed with the words, "The sun suddenly disappeared." Suddenly, he felt a sense of dread, that the sun might never rise again. The sun did rise as usual, but a thick fog covered the sky, forming a white and yellow jade disk in the east, like a peeled, boiled egg, with the yolk struggling to break free. Overnight, all of nature had shed its clothes, displaying its charming form. Ethan walked through several clumps of ginkgo trees, their leaves fluttering in the wind like the tears of a lover scattered upon the earth. The ground was covered with leaves, like age spots on an old person's face, sunken and yellow, full of senility. The persimmon leaves, flushed red as if drunk with farewell wine or having cried their eyes out, drooped their heads bashfully towards the ground. He carried his books and prepared to return to the dorm. 2 rows of people stood in front of the apartment building, the dorm manager pointing and scolding each one, seemingly taking revenge for the night before. The people bowed their heads meekly, like mourners for the victims of the Zhotu mudslide, but Ivan Liu, in the middle, had a pale face, clenched teeth, and fists that tightened audibly. His chest rose and fell with each breath. A large crowd gathered, surrounding the scene tightly, but the scolding was like a sharp, cold blade, seemingly able to cut off a pound of flesh with each swing. Ethan struggled to push his way through, but Paul grabbed him by the collar and pulled him in. When the crowd saw Paul, they parted to create a narrow path. Paul slapped his leg with a grin, shouting, "That's great." The crowd burst into laughter amidst the dorm manager's scolding. The harsher the scolding, the more amused they became, like watching an ancient execution, curious, excited, and completely forgetting about eating. Suddenly, the crowd surged, everyone simultaneously stepping back, and the noisy chatter vanished, replaced by an eerie silence. "Damn it! Have you said enough?" Ivan punched the dorm manager in the jaw, causing her to scream like a pig being slaughtered. The dorm manager covered her bleeding mouth with one hand and pointed at him with the other, her eyes filled with a venomous glare. You. She stuttered, trembling with rage, then dropped her arm, placed her hands on her hips, and leaned forward until her waist was at an 80-degree angle to the ground. Everyone expected another round of insults, but reality often defied expectations. You, what? As she spoke, a punch landed like lightning, but the dorm manager quickly ducked, only to be blocked by the onlookers. 2 bloody teeth flew out of her mouth. "Damn it! I hate hitting women the most, don't make me." His fist landed on the dorm manager's glasses, cracking them into 2 thin white lines, but avoiding her eyes. His precise control of his strength was remarkable, scaring the dorm manager into closing her eyes and bracing for pain. He withdrew his fist, and the dorm manager, still lost in the safety of her closed eyes, was startled by the cheers and laughter around her. She opened her eyes, filled with anger and embarrassment, and looked at Paul, who was laughing so hard he was bent over. "Paul, help me hold him down, take him to the student affairs office," she said. Paul looked on with a greasy smile, seemingly not hearing her, and blew out a cloud of smoke. "Paul, I'm giving you special permission," the dorm manager said, her mouth comically distorted, gasping for air between each word. Her face twitched with pain, one cheek twitching once, the other twice. She stuffed some money into Paul's hand, trembling as she urged him to act. Paul took a deep drag, exhaling a series of smoke rings, then quickly and ruthlessly stomped out his cigarette with his right foot, a killing intent in his movements. "Brother, it's been a while," Paul said, cupping his fist in a traditional greeting. "Long time no see, Paul," Ivan said, flicking his thumb across his nose and onto his shoulder, tracing a graceful arc, as if flicking away a booger with contempt. "Looks like 3 days apart and you should be looked at with new eyes. Your boxing skills have improved," Paul said with a fake smile. "That's for sure, especially with a master like you in school." "It's hard not to improve," Ivan said with a grin. "You're too kind," Paul said, bowing his head. The crowd was completely baffled. Former enemies, who had once fought to the death, were now exchanging meaningless pleasantries. They held their breath, carefully listening to every word, suspecting that some hidden meaning lay beneath the surface. "How's Scarlett doing?" Paul asked, staring intently at him. Ethan's heart suddenly leapt like a rabbit. "Scarlett, sure? Why bring up that bitch? Our hatred all started because of her. If you want her, you can have her," Ivan said casually, as if offering a mere object. "Damn it!" Paul punched him in the jaw. "What do you think she is? Something you can just give away?" Paul's heart was filled with mixed emotions, joy at the thought of being with Scarlett, anger at Ivan for disrespecting his dream girl, pain that Scarlett had been blind to his feelings, and sadness that Scarlett had always treated him indifferently, saying she didn't feel anything. Ivan covered his jaw and laughed, his laughter unsteady, almost causing him to fall. He pointed at Paul. "What are you playing at, a saint? Don't think I don't know your tricks. Women are like clothes, brothers are like limbs. You'd actually do this for a woman." Paul punched him again, and Ivan took the blow head-on, laughing. "Women, they look all pure and innocent on the outside, but they've been planning to cheat on you for years." He spread his hands. Ivan Liu, only told you so much because I considered you a brother. I don't want to fight anymore. Let's go, the student affairs office it is. I've been everywhere, who am I afraid of?" A large crowd surged towards the student affairs office to watch the excitement. Paul put his arm around Ethan's shoulder and grinned. "Which girl do you have a crush on?" Ethan's heart pounded. "Our Stone's got his eye on some girl? Tell me, brother will help you get her." Ethan didn't dare say it was Scarlett. He knew that Paul and Ivan had fought over Scarlett many times, and that Paul had spent 6 months in the hospital before returning to school. "Don't pretend anymore, I read that love poem you wrote, The Love Blown by the Wind," Paul said meaningfully. "Impossible, it's all impossible," Ethan murmured, looking at the ground. Paul looked at him thoughtfully. Suddenly, a sharp sound pierced their ears. "The broadcast? We have a new announcement. The apocalypse is purely the fabrication of rumor mongers. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, the Earth will last for at least another 4 billion years. The president of the Chinese Academy of Sciences said. A world environment and protection expert said. "Damn it! They're refuting the rumors again. In China, whatever they say won't happen is exactly what will happen," Paul sighed. "I'm going out to buy a roll of toilet paper, can't always use yours, right?" Paul said to Ethan with a smile. "The school gates are locked, you can't get out," Ethan said, walking into the apartment building. "Lawless, they think I'm a prisoner, and they're the prison warden," he said, pulling his trench coat. The hem of the coat fluttered in the wind, and he walked straight towards the school gate. The school gate was tightly locked, and 7 or 8 campus security guards, wearing blue uniforms and holding barbed clubs, guarded the narrow entrance. "Damn it!" Paul did some warm-up exercises and stopped 10 meters from the gate. "You!" One of the guards pointed his barbed club at Paul. Paul pointed at himself, looking terrified, and walked towards the guard. What? The guard's face was full of bulging muscles. I told you not to come closer. What are you doing? Paul looked bewildered. I thought you wanted me to help you. The guard's expression softened slightly. Go back. Paul waited for the guard to turn his back, then launched a surprise attack, leaping towards the top of the gate. The guards below raised their barbed clubs and knocked him down in a few blows. The guard grabbed him by the collar, looming over him like a dark cloud, and dragged him towards a secluded spot in the tree-lined path. Paul shouted, "Let go! Let go!" He used his small body to struggle like an ant trying to shake a tree, but couldn't break free. You'll regret this, he said to the guard, his voice full of determination. The guard laughed. Regret? Not unless your dad is Mike Gang. My dad isn't Mike Gang, officer. Have a cigarette. It's not easy for anyone, especially in the dead of winter, he said, offering a cigarette with both hands like a devout Tibetan offering a kata. The guard's eyes lit up. Not bad, a furlong wang, you've got a future. You're too kind, he said. As the guard reached for the cigarette, Paul deliberately fumbled and dropped it on the ground. The guard exclaimed, "Huh?" and bent down to pick it up. Paul turned around and kicked him in the back, using the momentum to jump and run like the wind, shouting, "Only an idiot would smoke that." He ran out of breath and hid behind a tree, peering out. No one was chasing him. That was close, lucky I didn't kill him, he said, then laughed loudly, as if he had drunk 5 bottles of wine. He went to the low wall where he usually stayed up all night. He jumped and climbed over, still cursing, a bunch of idiots. He walked along the quiet road. There were no cars or pedestrians as there usually were, only shops with locked doors and wild advertisements about the apocalypse on the telephone poles. He walked all afternoon without seeing a single person, not even a rat. The air was filled with a faint, buzzing sound. It wasn't the wind, he was sure, because there was no wind. He didn't know where to go. He thought of Scarlett, and his heart ached. Like a rootless duckweed, he didn't know where he was going. Ethan returned to his dorm, which was empty. There wasn't even a rat to be seen. The dorm was still dark, with no electricity, and everyone seemed to have vanished. Paul hadn't returned all night. Where had he gone? Ethan curled up alone in his cold bed, and warm tears welled up in his eyes. A warm, smiling face appeared before him, fair cheeks, feathery black hair at her temples and ears, starry eyes, and moonlit lips. It was Scarlett. He hadn't said much to her, but was it true that saying a lot always lead to love? It was a mystery, an unspeakable, inexplicable, inextricable emotion that gnawed at his heart and nerves like a venomous snake. He was awakened in the middle of the night by a buzzing sound. He opened his eyes and nervously reached out to the wall to prop himself up. The sound seemed to be coming from between the walls. When he put his hand on the wall, the buzzing faded, but when he took his hand away, it returned. Tormented all night by the rat-like sound, he thought of countless things. Things he had thought about countless times. From the first time he saw Scarlett to the last, each time it was like a play unfolding vividly before his eyes. Scarlett seemed to live in his heart, appearing before him every day, her lifelike expressions and simple, unadorned words causing him to burst into tears and then smile again. In the morning, he put his hands on the balcony railing and took a deep breath of fresh air. The few figures in the apartment building made his heart tremble. Could it be that there were only 1 or 2 people left in each dorm? But it was true. Where had everyone gone? There wasn't a single person on the empty road. He wondered if his eyes were playing tricks on him. Suddenly, a familiar figure floated past. His heart tightened. Was it Scarlett? On closer inspection, it wasn't her, but a girl who looked very much like her, standing downstairs. After a while, she was led away by a man holding her hand. Ethan watched the man's back with envy, secretly cursing him, as if the woman really was Scarlett, and the man had stolen her away from him. Was that Scarlett? His eyes ached from staring. He confirmed that it was Scarlett and Ivan walking arm in arm in the distance. He was both excited and heartbroken. Ivan was kissing Scarlett passionately, wanting to suck out her intestines, stomach, and heart. He was so angry that his face turned yellow, and his teeth were clenched tightly. He slapped the railing with all his might, the sound like he was slapping Ivan's face. His hand was swollen, but he didn't notice. "Hey, buddy, practicing iron palm?" Ivan shouted from below. A few heads popped out of the balcony of the apartment building, looking at him. He suddenly felt fear, shame, and unease. When had they walked downstairs? He hadn't noticed at all. "Little Ethan, what are you doing?" Scarlett's sweet and worried voice immediately stopped him from slapping Ivan further. "Scarlett," he said timidly. "It's nothing." His fingers were connected to his heart. As soon as he stopped, a sharp pain spread from his arm to his ert. He had put all his strength into the slaps, and now he could only grimace and moan inwardly. Ivan chuckled. He had already seen Ethan standing on the balcony. He had always disliked these weaklings who only knew how to use their pens. He had read The Love Blown by the Wind and felt that it was about his girlfriend, Scarlett. After the probing just now, he was even more certain that it was about Scarlett. He glanced at Scarlett, smiling inwardly at how this girl could attract so many people. No wonder she wasn't a virgin when he met her. He had planned to sell his girlfriend to Paul for $5,000, but the guy seemed to have evaporated. What about this kid? As he was thinking about this, a loud crash suddenly rang in his ears, like a string of firecrackers exploding in the air. All the heads on the balcony craned their necks to see. The newly built building was indeed a tofu drag project. Like a building being demolished by explosives, the 50-meter-tall building turned into a 3-meter-high pile of rubble in the blink of an eye, sending up a cloud of dust. The crowd looked as if they had seen a monster flying out of the building. They trembled and clicked their tongues, worried that their apartment building would also be knocked down by the monster. 50-odd people from 2 apartment buildings? Less than a tenth. Where were the others? Looks like the apartment building can't be lived in anymore. Ivan was one of the most notorious gangsters in the school. There were 2 types of people who were respected in school: good students with excellent grades and bad students who smoked and drank. Good students were admirable, and bad students were feared. Both were influential people in the school. Now the school is a ghost town. The teachers, professors, and the principal have all bailed out, but they've left the school dogs guarding the gates, not letting anyone out. The crowd applauded and cheered in agreement. Boo. When there are policies from above, there are countermeasures from below. We'll climb over the wall. The crowd seemed to wake up from a dream and exclaimed, "Oh." It turned out that so many people had escaped. He grabbed Ethan and pulled him to the back of the crowd, whispering in his ear, "Give me $6,000, and I'll let you have your Scarlett." Ethan couldn't believe his ears and lowered his head, blushing, wishing he could disappear into the ground like Earthworm Jim. "If you don't want her, I'll give her to Paul," Ivan said, seeing Ethan's hesitation. "Is it really the apocalypse?" Ethan asked. "Nonsense. Do you agree or not?" Ivan said impatiently. "What are you going to do with so much money if it's the apocalypse?" Ethan asked, confused, scratching his head. "Damn it! Yes or no?" Ivan shouted angrily, drawing attention from the crowd. "I only have 2,000, Ethan said timidly. "That's fine, too. The day after tomorrow night, just one night." Ethan was overjoyed. As long as he could be with Scarlett, even for one night, it would be better than waiting 1,000 years. As long as he could be with the one he loved, what did it matter if it was just for a short time? It would be enough for this lifetime. Ivan and Scarlett were sitting on the steps of the East Gate Square, looking at the huge arched bridge at the school gate. Yesterday, Ivan had gone to the student affairs office, but the door was locked. There were no teachers there. A large group of people dragged their heavy steps back in disappointment. The dorm manager glared at him venomously, then screamed and ran away as if she had seen a ghost, disappearing like a rocket. The school leader's convoy drove away from the school, speeding along the empty road, but he had seen the principal's stern and anxious face clearly. The convoy seemed to be trapped in a ghost wall, driving back and forth on the road, endlessly. There wasn't a single security guard at the school gate. They had probably gone home to take care of their kids, Ivan thought with a grin. A familiar figure walked over from afar, thin as smoke, gradually turning into a menacing cloud. It was Paul. Ivan stood up and walked over to Paul. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Have you thought about it? Waiting for me? Paul laughed strangely. What are you two talking about in private? Scarlett asked with a smile. Men's business, women shouldn't interrupt, Ivan said fiercely. $5,000, and I'll sell you my girlfriend. Ivan saw Paul wringing his hands and added, aren't you in love with her? Now's your chance. 4,000? I only have 3,000, Paul Kong said, looking directly at Ivan Lu, his eyes shining with a resolute and happy light. 3,000 is only good for one night, Ivan Lu said, patting Paul Kong on the shoulder. Aren't you being a little greedy? All women are the same with the lights off. There's 1,000 on this agricultural bank card, the password is 199110, Paul Kong said, firmly pressing the card into his hand. All right, you win. Room 408, Building 6, 8 o'clock tonight, Ivan Lu said with a smile. Paul Kong strolled along the bluestone path, taking a delighted glance at Scarlett Shur. Her distinctive, pure face and graceful figure were like something out of a fairy tale, both enchanting and romantic. He smacked his lips, and 3 wisps of cigarette smoke drifted from the corner of his mouth, clinging to his cheek as they floated away. The sports field was empty, without a single person. The football field stood still, the track was still, the surrounding fences were still, the steps were still. Gone were the crowds and boisterous laughter of the past, leaving only withered grass roots shivering and swaying, emitting a buzzing sound. Paul Kong walked around the sports field a few times, and cherished memories flooded back. One night, he and Scarlett Shur had strolled along the field, talking about many things with dreamy abandon. Now, he was just a solitary figure laughing with his own shadow, one person becoming 3. The melancholy in his heart poured down like moonlight, turning into concentrated salt on an open wound. He barely managed to endure until 8 o'clock. Frost stars had already crept across the sky, like the dense white hair on an old person's head. He straightened his clothes, looked in the mirror for a while, adjusted his hair, eyes, nose, and mouth, and finally nodded with satisfaction, confidently blowing a breath that made his hair fall smoothly. Whistling, he arrived at 408. He knocked on the door, but no one answered for a long time. He banged on the door again, but still no one opened it. Angrily, he punched and kicked, beating on the door while cursing Ivan Lu as a bastard. Suddenly, the door opened a crack, and soft light poured out, as gentle and poetic as moonlight. With a creak, the door opened further. Scarlett Shur was sitting on the edge of the bed, her figure softened by the faint candlelight, surrounded by a halo like an angel, sacred and pure. Her moon-white pajamas were dyed a light yellow by the candlelight. Paul Kong went inside. A huge black shadow, like a monster, lurked and spied on the wall. From now on, you're mine, he said, patting Scarlett Shur's leg. Have you not brushed your teeth in 10 years? You're suffocating me, Scarlett Shur said, covering her nose and pushing him away. I haven't even kissed you yet, you're getting ahead of yourself, Paul Kong laughed. Do you know why I like Ivan Lu and not you? No. The eyes are the windows to the soul, and teeth are the soul itself. Didn't the ancients say bright eyes and white teeth? Someone with good teeth must have a kind heart, Scarlett Shur said in a soft voice, her face glowing with happiness. Then do you think Ivan Lu is kind? If he was kind, he wouldn't have given you to me, pow. El Kong said smugly, as he began to take off his pants. His nature is kind. What are you doing? Scarlett Shur shouted, pushing Paul Kong away. You'll understand, Paul Kong said, grabbing Scarlett Shur's hand. Just once, he said as his mouth pressed down on hers. She struggled violently. His tongue, like a bloodsucker, pried open her mouth. She tried to use her own tongue to push his out, but it was immediately entangled. Her heart sank. She had been kissed after all. Tears streamed from the corners of her eyes, and her body trembled slightly as she sobbed. She used all her strength. One moment her body was strong and full of energy, the next she was weak and yielding, like chocolate slowly melting over a flame, until finally she lost all consciousness. In her dream, she and Ivan Lu were at the beach, the warm seawater licking her toes. A furry dog rubbed against her. Ivan Lu held her as they lay on the golden sand. A half-setting sun was embedded in the sea a green color on either side with a red line in the middle, just like the red thread that the old man in the moon used to tie her and Ivan Lou together. She didn't realize what had happened until the morning. Heavy snoring, like a bellows, went whoosh whoosh whoosh, shaking the bed as if it were a bumpy ride. Clothes were scattered all over the floor, as if they were a street vendor's wares. "Oh, you're awake," Paul Kong said, seeing Scarlet Shore seemingly looking for something, his gaze immediately falling on her full buttocks. Scarlet Shore shuddered, but quickly recovered and began rummaging through drawers. "What are you looking for?" He reached out towards Scarlet Shore's waist. Scarlet Shore turned to him and smiled. The smile was so mysterious and strange that his mind blurred, and he blacked out and fell to the ground. Ethan Lee wandered alone around the vast school grounds. The tall leaves of the redwood trees fell like sleepy butterflies. The dark yellow leaves had thin, feather-like black veins running through them. He suddenly remembered the dragon-beard shrimp he had eaten as a child, like a puff of yellow hair, sweet and crispy, melting in his mouth and leaving crumbs all over his face, like Santa Claus. The buzzing sound grew louder and louder, as if a meeting were being held beneath his feet. The gloomy, lead-gray sky was filled with rain-heavy clouds, and the sun had not been seen for a long time. He felt an inexplicable sadness, wanting to see Scarlet Shore but also afraid to see her, his heart half joy and half pain. As he knocked on the door of 408, it felt as if he was knocking on his own heart. He couldn't hear the knocking sound, only the pounding of his own heart. The door suddenly opened, and Scarlet Shore looked at him in alarm. "What are you doing here?" "Scarlet, I just wanted to talk to you," Ethan Lee said, uneasily lowering his head. "Just talk?" Scarlet Shore said with a light laugh. Ethan Lee nodded and went inside. It was a small room, with all sorts of books stacked on the desk. On the bed, next to the pillow, were two cute pandas and neatly folded blankets. On the wall was a poster of the handsome and stylish Wu Yi. A faint fragrance filled the air, sweet as if he were in a sea of flowers, making his mood light and cheerful. He suddenly saw an iron pestle behind the door, which seemed out of place with the delicate atmosphere. It felt like he had a bug crawling around in his heart. "Scarlet, what's that iron pestle doing there?" Scarlet Shore paused, then smiled. "I have rheumatism. When the weather is gloomy, my legs hurt, and I hit them a few times to make it feel better." He nodded politely. "It's been a cold winter, Scarlet. You should take care of yourself." "I will, thank you for your concern," Scarlet Shore replied. "Why do you keep looking down at me? Am I that ugly?" "No, Scarlet, you're very beautiful. I'm just afraid of getting a nosebleed," he said anxiously. "Look up at me," Scarlet Shore said, playfully lifting his chin. His heart was pounding like a drum, and he felt as nervous as if countless insects were crawling and gnawing at his heart. Their eyes met. Blood? He wiped his nose and his hand was covered in blood. He frantically pulled a handkerchief out of his pocket. "A handkerchief?" Scarlet Shore looked at the handkerchief in surprise. "Who gave you that?" He suddenly woke up as if from a dream. It was the one he had picked up from Scarlet Shore, and he was so anxious that he couldn't speak. He just shrugged, pointed at his nose with his thumb, implying that he had a nosebleed and couldn't speak. Scarlet Shore was surprised and familiar with the gesture. "Damn it! You dare imitate my actions, it's so disgusting." "No," he finally squeezed out a word, and the action and tone were actually 3 parts like hers. She suddenly felt a familiar yet strange feeling, as if she were mocking herself. A grown man acting girlishly and inappropriately. She got even angrier and kicked him off the bed. "Don't imitate me, it's disgusting." Seeing Scarlet getting so angry, his heart filled with sourness, and he burst into tears. "Scarlet, I like you." Scarlet Shore was stunned on the bed, muttering to herself, "What did you say?" He suddenly realized that he had said the wrong thing and closed his mouth in shame. The silent room was devoid of sound. He looked at his hands, bending his fingernails back and forth. She suddenly sighed and smiled, a warm and unadorned smile. "I heard everything you said. But just like your Bao Chai Rhapsody, even if it's good, it's still dirt, even if it's bad, it's still jade. I don't like you. I only like Ivan Lou, no matter how he treats me." "Do you still love Ivan Lou?" Why? Why don't you look at the other people around you, instead of hanging yourself on one tree? His heart ached, and the tears made his eyes burn and his nose tingle, but he stubbornly held them back. Love is walking together in the dark, with countless bumps and thorns along the way. Any shrinking back or cowardice means the apocalypse. It's also a painful joy. Any abandonment means the apocalypse. Love is the deep longing of a bleeding soul under a sharp blade. You don't need a reason to love someone. You can live for them, you can die for them, even go to the underworld together. She said it with conviction, her eyes as bright as those of a Communist Party member swearing allegiance under the party flag. Perhaps everything is as it should be. Fish shouldn't be infatuated with the sky, and birds shouldn't be infatuated with water. He finally burst into tears of heartbreak. Don't cry. Who's going to like you when you cry like a little girl? She wiped the tears from his face. In this lifetime, I won't like anyone but Scarlett, just like you like Ivan Liu. Even if I can't have you, it's painful and joyful. I'm really afraid that one day I won't even feel the pain anymore. He gritted his teeth, and a determined look flashed across his chiseled face. Scarlett is touched. In the apocalypse, everything will cease to exist, even love will be buried, Scarlett sure said, tears streaming down her face. Apocalypse, are you talking about the movie 2012? He forced a smile. What 2012? Movies are all fiction. In a real apocalypse, people will slowly die. It is said that China has built 9 Noah's Arks called Jojo, with tickets costing $1 million, capable of holding 10,000 people. It's ridiculous, it's just self-deception. The apocalypse is just the spiritual desolation and decadence, but they think it's a natural disaster, she said, then burst into a long, chilling laugh. Ethan Lee hadn't seen Scarlett Shur for days after saying goodbye to her. Everything in 408 was neatly arranged, but without Scarlett and the iron pestle behind the door, everything seemed bleak and desolate. The weather was getting colder and colder, and the days were getting shorter and shorter. He had eaten all the dry food in the dormitory. He wandered around the school, hoping to catch a few field mice or sparrows to fill his stomach, but all living things seemed to have disappeared long ago. He wished it was summer, so at least he could eat flies and mosquitoes. He was so hungry that he was skin and bones, his eyes sunken, and he looked decades older. Suddenly, something darted across his path. He excitedly chased after it, stumbling all the way, until suddenly he twisted his ankle and fell to the ground with a thud. The prey took the opportunity to escape. He slammed the ground hard. His hungry stomach rumbled, seemingly complaining that he had let lunch turn into a bubble. He looked left, looked right, and slapped himself in the face. The burning pain made him temporarily forget the panic of hunger. Where did it run off to? He suddenly heard the sound of rushing water from the bathroom. He was startled and couldn't help but want to relieve himself and drink a few more liters of water. He slowly moved into the bathroom, opened the door, and suddenly recoiled as if he had seen a monster, standing there dumbfounded for a long time before tears began to flow. Scarlett? Ivan Liu? Paul Kong? Their heads were all shattered, their pale white pupils staring straight into the distance. Scarlett Shur was sitting in the middle, holding the iron pestle in her hand, a warm smile on her face. Scarlett, his face twitched violently, and tears flowed like a spring. He smiled and lay down in Scarlett Shur's arms, took the iron pestle from her hand and raised it up. Scarlett Shur's words flashed through his mind, the spiritual desolation and decadence is the apocalypse. The corner of his mouth turned up in a smile as he said, apocalypse.